Good morning. Thanks for joining me. 1 Corinthians 7 and 18. Paul continues, says, was anyone at the time of his call already circumcised? Let him not seek to remove the circumcision. Now, there was a procedure that could be done to kind of sort of remove that appearance of someone was circumcised. It says, was anyone at the time of his call uncircumcised? It says, okay, don't try to seek circumcision. He says, neither circumcision counts for anything, nor uncircumcision, but keeping the commandments of God. Here's something that's important. Now, we need to recognize that the New Testament, there are commandments. There are commands. We're not following all the Old Testament commandments, the Old Testament law. We're not under the Mosaic law. But there are still laws that are given to us. They are repeated for us in the New Testament. We have the words of Jesus. And so we are to keep it. But it's not circumcision or uncircumcision. Not that that kind of spiritual background that you've come with to Christ. And these were people who came out of Judaism. He says each one should remain in the condition in which he was called. Now, that is not referring to the moral position, because somebody might take this verse and say, okay, I can remain. If I'm a drug addict, remain in addiction. If I'm in adultery, I can remain in adultery. If I'm a brawler, a swindler, that Bible says I can remain in that condition. He's not talking about a moral position. He's talking more about a social or cultural position that where you were at. Because when God saves you, he doesn't want to change your identity, your cultural identity so much so that you cannot be able to reach people within the same culture. If each one is to remain in the condition in which he was called. Were you a bondservant? So this is what exactly he's talking about. Were you a bondservant? Were you a slave when called? He says, don't be concerned about it. So he's saying, okay, if you were a slave, you're a bondservant. And this word servant and bondservant and slaves, they're used in separate contexts in the New Testament, in the sense that in terms of meaning, there are people who were voluntarily, they went in to become a bondservant. They kind of sold themselves into that, and they would be in that position for years, and they can even buy their way out, buy their freedom. They can there's some who are servants. They have a lot of rights and so on. And of course, there's the other slavery too, but not like the slavery we see in the 18th century in North America. So Paul is saying, were you a bondservant when you were called? You can remain there. He says, if you can gain your freedom, avail yourself of the opportunity. If you can gain your freedom, if you can, so again, this is showing us that Paul and the Bible is not against us developing ourselves, moving forward, making progress, social progress, financial progress, and things like that. If you can gain your freedom, God doesn't want us to be in bondage. He says, if you can gain your freedom, go ahead, do it. Take full advantage of that opportunity. Amen.